Hey everybody, welcome to Harmon Garage. I'm Aaron. Before I get started today, because I know people like to skip through the videos when you're talking and stuff like that, I just want to wish all of you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, or whatever holiday it is for you guys this time of year. I hope you have a merry, happy one of those also. But this is going to be the last video before Christmas, and happy holidays to everybody. So I'm super pumped up today because today is the day that we are going to reassemble this 307 for my son's truck, Ron Jeremy. And assembling motors is one of my favorite things to do. So the weather's already getting cold here. If you're in the United States, I'm sure you get it because there's cold everywhere right now. But I got a couple heaters set up over here, mainly just so I can get it warm enough to paint the block or paint it once I get it assembled, because I want to get it all done today. It's already afternoon. I didn't get over here till late because I had some running around I had to do this morning, and then my wife had to go get groceries before they shut the roads down, because here in Alabama they don't have plow trucks, salt trucks, anything like that. We're supposed to have really cold temperatures for us, and so they already put out a warning that they're gonna do, or there's a do not travel on roadways restriction coming. So I don't know if it's gonna get that bad. I don't know if they will for sure, but my wife had to go grocery shopping just to make sure that, you know, if that did happen and we couldn't go anywhere, we still had food to eat. So it's late in the afternoon. I already told her I'm not coming home till this motor's done, and I'm gonna film all of it for you guys. So I'm gonna start getting some stuff ready, and then we'll get to it. First thing I'm gonna do is hone these cylinders. They look really good. They don't have any ring ridges on them or anything like that, but I'm using this to clean them up. And I've seen a lot of people do things a lot of different ways when it comes to honing. I've seen people use the ball hones, dip them in cans of motor oil. I've seen people use grease. I've seen people use all kinds of different stuff. I'm using a stone style hone for one reason, because I already had it, and it's basically one size fits all. Where the ball hones, you got to kind of buy a different one for different bore sizes. So this works for me, and when I'm honing I use WD-40. It's a lubricant for the hone, but it's also a cleaner. So I'm kind of using the stone with the WD-40 as a cleaner, clean that cylinder out, and I'm honing it at the same time. At least logically in my mind, that makes sense to me. So I'm just going to go ahead and soak this cylinder down really good. I'll run my hone in there. Now when you're honing something, you want to start with it all the way down in the cylinder. You don't want to start it up here and force it in. You want to start with it all the way in there, and you don't need to go real fast. Just kind of get it going at a steady speed and go all the way up and down. You want to keep it moving. You don't ever want to stop. Just keep it spinning and keep it moving up and down all at the same time. And once you run it there for a decent amount of time, I'm going to stop it in the cylinder. I'm going to take it out, and then I'm going to look in here. I'll wipe away the WD-40 and the dirt. And it's nice and smooth, and I got some really good cross hatching. I'm going to keep going, get the other 7 cylinders done. When I get them all done and get it cleaned up, I'll clean it up real good, and then I'll bring you guys in here and show you what they look like after I got them honed. But if they all turn out as good as that one did, I'm going to be very happy, and I'm glad that I'm honing them. So I'm just going to race through this real quick, and then we'll go on to the next step. Okay, I got that all honed. Now I'm going to take just some blue shop towels, some brake parts cleaner, and I'm going to clean the cylinders really well. It's not so much that I want to get the WD-40 out of there, because it's not going to hurt anything, but I want to get all the little stuff that we ground off of there out. And remember, we put PV Blaster in here to keep it from rusting. We've had WD-40 in here, and then just honing it. Those honing stones get dirty, and all the little stuff that they clean out of the cylinder walls, and the little bit of metal that they take off to, you know, like when you're sanding it. So just make sure I scrub them down really good, get them really nice and clean. Well, I guess I had too many heaters plugged into the same breaker, so I'm gonna go take care of that. I'm gonna wash down this last cylinder and then I'll get back with you. Alright, got all the cylinders honed out, got them cleaned up. You can see in there, I think you can see in there, they look pretty clean. Got a nice crosshatch pattern on them. Next thing I'm gonna do is roll the block over. I'm gonna clean the crank journals. I'm going to reach down in there and clean the cam bearings the best that I can, just to make sure. I know I've already cleaned them like 3 times, but I just want to make sure there's nothing in there. And so we're going to clean up, like I said, the journals, cam bearings, and then we'll get ready to stuff the crank in there. Alright, I got my bearings here. I'm going to open them up. Now these are 1010 bearings. If you watched the other video where I took the motor apart, you'll remember that I found out that crank was stamped 1010. So I got 1010 means it's been turned 10 over on the mains and 10 over on the rods. So I got 10 over main bearings and 10 over rod bearings. Just taking a little bit of assembly lube, putting it down in there. It's not a huge deal here because that part doesn't move, but it helps to hold the bearing in place while you're assembling it. I already got my crank all cleaned up. I got my main caps all cleaned up. I got my bolts all cleaned up. So once I get these set in here, then I'll be ready to set the crank in. Alright, for those of you that are new to this and don't know, this is called your thrust bearing. See how it's got these ears with wear spots on the sides? This is what your crank, it's what stops your end play on your crank. So if this thrust bearing gets worn out and it lets your crank move back and forth too much and cause problems. So and on this one, when you're looking at this bearing, you see here it's got a hole in it. Here it doesn't have a hole in it. This is the block side with the hole, and you got to match the hole up with the hole in the block. So go ahead. Put some lube in there. And then we're going to take this. Set it right down in there. And then we're just going to double check and make sure that our hole's perfectly lined up. And it is. So now, before I do anything else, I'm going to go get the rear main seal, put it in. Anything before 86, late 86, should have a 2-piece rear main seal, which this is a 72 block, so it'll have a 2-piece rear main seal. So one piece sits in here, the crank sits on it, the other side goes in this main cap that goes over this thrust bearing. So I'm going to go get the rear main, at least half of it, put it in there, and then we'll be able to set the crank in here. This is our rear main seal. Like I said, it's a 2-piece. Half of it goes down here in the block, half of it goes up in the main cap. And you want to look at these good. This one came in a sealed bag, soaked in some kind of oil or fluid or something, which is good because that keeps it nice and pliable so it doesn't dry out. And so if you look real close, I don't know if you can see that or not, but right there it says flywheel side. So we're going to take that. Obviously the flywheel's toward the back, so we're just going to take our seal, we're just going to push it right down in there, make sure it's nice and even on both sides. And then I got my other half that's going to go in that main cap. So what I'm going to do now, get you guys back where you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to go back with my lube, assembly lube. There's many different kinds of assembly lube. I prefer this Lucas high performance assembly lube. It's kind of like a gel lube. They've got moly graphite, they've got all kinds of different stuff. I like this stuff. I put a little bit in my rear main just to make sure it's lubed up. And in my personal opinion, you can never use too much. So I just ooze it in there until it's running out, basically. And this motor, not like we're just gonna put it in the truck tomorrow and fire it up and it's gonna have oil pressure and have oil moving right away. You know how the way things go. This thing could sit for 6 months before it ever sees oil pressure. So now before I start it, after it sits, before I start it the first time, I'll put a priming tool in the oil pump and build oil pressure. But for right now, I just want to make sure we got plenty of lube in there on those bearings and that crank, so that we don't have any dry starts or anything like that when we go to start it. I got this all lubed up. I'm gonna go grab the crank. We'll set it in here, and then we'll start putting our main caps on. All right, here's our crank. Now I'm gonna set it down in here, really nice and easy, so I don't move any bearings or that rear main seal or anything like that. I'm going to make sure it's seated all the way, and I'm going to let it sit just like that. I don't want to spin it, because if I spin it, that's going to bring that assembly lube that I've already put on there up and around, and I don't want to do that. I want to keep that assembly lube down there. Now after I put assembly lube on the bearing, the top bearings and the main caps, and bolt it down, then it's all going to have lube and it's going to be okay. But I don't want to scrape the lube out of the bottom, bring it up to the top, put more lube on the top, bolt it down, and then not have any lube on the bottom. So I just set them in there, leave them, and I'll go grab the mains, put those together, and get them started. Alright, I'm going to start with the very back, my thrust cap, with my, which also has my rear main in it. I'm going to look at it again, see where it says flywheel side, which is over here. I'll get that set down in there. Get my bearing down in there. You want to be careful and make sure you don't leave any fingerprints on your bearing surfaces too. So, wipe that off. Put some lube in here. Put a little bit on my rear main there. Take this, set it down in place. Grab my bolts. Just going to get them snug. I don't even have a wrench over here for them yet. So we're just going to snug them up. Now I'll grab the rest of my bearings. I'll do the same thing with the rest of my caps. All my caps are numbered and they all have an arrow from the factory pointing forward. The arrow always points forward. So I'm going to go ahead and put my bearings in, lube them up, make sure I got the right cap facing the right way. We'll put the other 4 caps on. I got my torque wrench. I've looked it up, and some people say these caps should be torqued to 65 foot-pounds, and some people say they should be torqued to 70. So I'm not going to say one or the other is right, but I set my torque wrench at 68. So if it's supposed to be 65, it'll be over torqued by 3 pounds. If it's supposed to be 70, it'll be under torqued a little bit. Just looking to make sure my caps are seated down in the ridge in the block, which they are. That one is too. Now, since I put them in by hand, you might notice I'm kind of tightening one side a little bit, then going over tightening the other side before I actually put the torque on them. That's just to make sure they go in there evenly and get down in those grooves like they're supposed to. Alright, crank's all torqued down. I'm going to go get the crank bolt threaded in there, and I should be able to just spin this thing over easy as can be. If I can't, well, there, I can do it like that. I don't even need the crank bolt. It should turn nice and smooth like it is. If it doesn't, then you got a problem. But it's turning nice and free, so we should be okay. I guess it's time to start putting pistons in. There's something I was thinking of real quick that I haven't mentioned to you guys. I'm not building a race car motor here. I'm not building a high performance motor. I'm building a daily driver, you know, just regular old, basically daily driver motor. So, like, I know when you put new bearings in, you're supposed to check tolerances for the bearings and all that stuff. It's not that critical. I mean, I guess it could be, but it's not. I've done it this way 100 times. I'm just putting the motor together so it can go in the truck and run. It's not going to be a race car. So I'm going to slap one of these pistons in, show you guys how I do it, and then I'll go ahead and knock the rest out so we're not sitting here watching the same thing over and over and over again. So I'm going to go grab a piston, grab the bearings, and we'll slap it in real quick. We got our piston. I just grabbed one. Oh, imagine that. I literally just went over and picked one up and said I'd put it in whatever hole it was, and it's actually number 1. So that works too. I just can't see what I'm doing. I'm going to try to pull the cap off. Okay, well, maybe I'm not. I'll be right back. Alright, now I'm going to pop the cap off. Still don't want to come off. Alright, I'm going to get the cap off. I'll be right back. Okay, I got that cap off. Now I've got some motor oil here and a rag. Not any particular kind of oil or anything like that. But what I'm going to do is just pour a little bit of oil on the rag. And I'm going to go in here. And I'm not pushing. I'm just lightly moving it around to get oil in that cylinder. So I can look in there and see oil's kind of running. I know I got oil in the cylinder, so we're good. Now, I'm reusing the old rings on this piston, on all the pistons, because they still got plenty of spring to them and they're still in good shape. Pistons all look in good shape. I cleaned them up, everything moves free. So I'm going to take my ring compressor here. If I can get it opened up. There we go. I'll slide it over my piston, like so. I always leave the skirts hanging out. It helps with alignment when you put them in. Make sure you get it on there nice and straight. You also want to check and make sure your rings are offset, which I did already. The gaps in the rings so they're not all in the same spot. And you look down in here, and if you look right now, you see that it doesn't have the piston ring compressed yet. You want to make sure you get that tightened up to where the rings are compressed all the way in there. because if they're not, then when you go to tap it down in the block, it's going to, you'll catch a ring, and that's a good way to break a ring or ruin a piston. I've seen both done before. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my crank to where the lobe for number 1 is all the way down. And then you've got pistons should be marked. Yeah, front is that way. So I'm going to set, and there's little deals you can get for these that cover them so they don't scar the crank if you hit it. If you're really careful, you shouldn't hit it, because when you'll see when I start tapping this piston down in there, I'm going to have my hand in there catching this. There's no way it's going to hit the crank. But before I start tapping it in there, I'm going to go ahead and put some lube in it. Grab my bearing. Get it set down in there. Make sure it's nice and straight. Front of the piston is this way. So I'm going to get this going down in there. And I'll get my skirts set in there. And now I'm going to reach up here and I'm going to grab this rod and I'm going to hold it with my other hand while I tap this down. And you notice I'm going real slow. Sorry if you didn't hear me. You notice I'm going real slow, just barely tapping it. I'm not just trying to drive it in there, because if it does start to catch a ring, I want to stop immediately. I don't want to just keep on tapping it to break something. So I just go real slow, and if it catches a ring, it won't move, and I'll stop and I'll pop it back out. And there it is. Now, let me try to do 15 things at one time here. See if I can get you guys over here where you can see. Okay, so I'm holding this with my hand, guiding it down. Now before I go ahead and get it all the way on there, I'm going to check and make sure my bearing's still in place where it's supposed to be, which it is. I'm going to go ahead and seat that all the way down against that journal on the crank. So it's all seated down in there where it needs to be now. I've got my rod cap. Put some lube in there. Grab my bearing. Get it put in there right. And now, see on this main cap, it's got a squared off side and it's got an angled side. So your squared off side should go against your crank journal. So like on this one, it's going to go to the front. Next one, it'll go to the back. Make sure I got plenty of lube in there. Get that on there. Give it a little tap to seat it. Grab our nuts. I'm telling you what, it's getting hot here with 2 heaters blowing on me. The block still feels cool. So hopefully I can get the block up to paintable temperature and not die of heat exhaustion here. I'm sweating pretty good. So alright, all that's left on that now is to torque it. I'm going to go ahead and do that same process 7 more times. Once we get that all done, I'll bring you guys back and show you what we're going to do next. I got all the pistons and rods and all that jazz put in. Now I'm going to go ahead and just rotate the motor over about 2 full revolutions. Make sure everything moves nice and free. No weird feelings or binds or anything like that. Everything feels good. We'll bring it up to number 1. Nice thing about this is you can get it dead on number 1. I went a little bit too far, so we'll roll it over again. Alright, you feel the piston moving up and then it stalls for a second before it starts going back down. That's your true number 1. So we got number 1 top dead center, right where it needs to be. Next thing I'm going to do, since I already got the motor tilted, I'm going to roll it up and stick the freeze plugs back in. Not for any reason, or I'm not doing this in any particular order. It's just I thought about it and the motor's already half sideways, so roll it up a little further, put them in here, roll it the other way, put them in the other side, and then start installing the cam, and just keep going through the process. Alright, I'm going to go get what I need to put the freeze plugs in. We'll do those real quick, and then time for the cam. So I got brand new freeze plugs. I got a socket that just barely fits in the freeze plug, and I got a tube of silicone here. Now, you don't have to put silicone on these. You can just stick them in there and they're press fit and they probably won't leak. They never had anything, any kind of sealant or anything on them from the factory that I know of. But this is just a little insurance policy for me that I'm not going to have to replace the freeze plug with it in the truck. At least not anytime soon. So what I do is I just put a real thin bead of silicone just at the bottom of the plug. Not like goobing it on there or anything, just real thin coat. Then I'm going to get my freeze plug set in there, and as square as I can get it. I'm just going to tap it in. You don't want to go too far because you can drive them all the way through, but you want them to be just a little bit past flush. taken. Wipe the excess silicone off just so it doesn't have a big goober of silicone there. And then I got 3 more to go. I had some people comment when I said I was only taking the side ones out that I should do the ones on the back of the block too, because if they fail, you got to pull the transmission to change them, which is correct, and I appreciate the input. But I believe this block was rebuilt not that long ago, and really the front freeze plugs and the side freeze plugs look like they weren't changed, but for some strange reasons the ones on the back of the block look like they were. They're brass and clean just like these, and don't have paint on them, so that tells me they've been changed. And I only got 4 freeze plugs, so I have to put the ones that I took out back in. So I might get a wild hair before I install the motor and do the back ones, but for right now we're only going to do the 4 on the side. Alright, well, my camera battery died while I was putting the second freeze plug in on the first side, and I heard the camera beep, but I figured you guys had already seen me install one, so you knew what I was doing. Went ahead and finished that one, did the 2 on the other side, and while I had the block sitting up to do the freeze plugs, I went ahead and pulled my fuel pump adapter plate off, cleaned the old gasket really good and all that stuff, put a new gasket on it, cleaned the plate up, bolted it back down. So that's done. Now we're going to roll the motor over and put the cam in. And the reason I'm doing the cam next is because once I get the cam and the timing chain on, then I can put the front timing cover on the motor, and I have to put the timing cover on before I put the oil pan on. I don't have to, but it makes life a lot easier. That's the way I like to do it. So I want to get the cam and the timing set on, timing cover on, oil pump, oil pan, and we're making good progress. So I'm going to roll that thing up and start stuffing that cam in there. Okay, cam I got for this is a Comp Cams. The part number is 12-210-2. It's a 286H-10. That's the 286 is the set, cam and lifter set. So we got that, and the cam specs are advanced duration is 268. Duration at 50 is 218. Valve lift is 454 with a 110 lobe separation. So it's not a huge cam, it's not a stock cam, it's just decent. So that's what we're going for. I wanted something with a little bit of spunk, nothing major. I kind of wanted to go a little bigger. I wanted to get up in the 500 lift, but went over and saw my buddy at Sibley's. This is what he had. This is what we got. And it'll be just fine. I mean, it's not like it needs to be a hot rod or anything like that. I just like to be a little spunky with them. So I'll get this opened up. Comp cams usually come with some lube. Yep, there it is. Alright. They come with their cam and lifter lubricant. If they don't, I use that same Lucas Oil assembly lube that I used for all the bearings and everything else, and it's always been fine. But since it comes with their own lube, I'm assuming that's what they recommend for it. And if you have any problems with the cam and you use their lube, then not really a whole lot of argument. So take the cam, overly grease it everywhere, and get it all over this thing. And try not to get it all over myself. Alright, that's that all lubed up. Now, I'm just gonna slowly walk it in here. I want to be real careful so you don't hit any of the lobes on the bearings, because you scratch a cam bearing, there goes your oil pressure. So you just want to be really careful putting it in. Just kind of walk it in, let it do its thing, don't force it. Try not to beat it around. You can put bolts in the end of it, and it helps get it in. But there it is, cam's installed. Looks like I got to turn the motor just a hair to have my mark on my bottom sprocket lined up. And so I honestly really need to pull that bottom sprocket off, because I got a whole new timing set. This one's got a little bit of wear on it. Actually, it really doesn't look bad at all. So we'll see. I might pull it off. I might reuse this one. Thinking I'm probably going to reuse this one because I'm being lazy and I don't want to take it off. And it doesn't really look like there's a lot of wear on it, so it should be good. So I know that's not the right way to go, guys, and I'm being lazy, but like I said, this motor, not a race car. And once my son gets the hang of driving, and hopefully he'll get into hot rodding a little bit more having this truck, we're going to build a bigger, gooder motor to put in it. So this is going to be to get it running and driving, and for him to get used to it and learn how to drive better and stuff like that. And then once he gets comfortable and hopefully wants a little more, we'll give him a little more. Or he won't like the truck at all, I'll end up with it and it'll definitely get a little bit more. So it should be fine. I'm gonna go get my timing set ready and slap it in here. Alright, small block Chevy double roller timing chain set from Cam's, part number 2100. Bet you can't guess where I got this from. That's right, Sibley's Customs, Columbus, Mississippi. If you're needing parts and you're in the area, he's by far the best place to go. So check him out if you can. And I just thought about it as I was telling you guys this. I'm going from a single roller chain to a double roller chain, so I have to change that sprocket. So people keeping me on my toes, not letting me get lazy. Better off anyways. I needed to change it. I was just being lazy. So I'm gonna have to get one of my apparatuses together and pull that off, and probably struggle and fight with it a lot longer than I need to, like I usually do. And honestly, that's the main reason I didn't want to change it, because I always end up fighting the dang things. So I'm gonna get some stuff together, get that pulled off, and then we'll put the new one on like we should. I actually remembered the little trick that I used last time. to get it off, and did it again, and it worked out great. So alright, we got 3 different settings on here. I want to set it to 0 because I'm setting my cam straight up. I'm not advancing or retarding it. So we'll get it on there. I got a socket that's bigger than my crank snout, so it'll sit on here. Drive that on there till it bottoms out. Extra little tap, make sure it's bottomed out. Now, when I was screwing my tool in there to get the motor, or to get the sprocket off, it was slowly turning the motor. So I'm going to have to roll it around again and get it back up on TDC. So you guys can't see it, but there's a little mark here I'll show you in a minute. You want it straight up and down. So that looks pretty good. On a small block Chevy, I know when you got your mark top, your woodruff keys, alignment keys are usually at about 1 o'clock. So we'll take our cam sprocket, get our chain on it, kind of turn our cam to roughly where it's going to need to be. Get our, we got to come down with the cam just a little bit more, like so. I got both my marks lined up, which I'll show you in a minute. I got my alignment dowel and my sprocket on the cam, and my bolt holes lined up, so we're in good shape. Now that I got the timing chain on, the cam and the crank are tied together and in sync, so it really doesn't matter what I move or do or whatever, the timing's going to be right from here on out. So you notice chain's nice and tight compared to that other one that was not at all. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten these bolts down in the cam, torque those to spec, and then we'll there's still a little bit of gasket over here on the block from the old timing cover, so we'll get that cleaned up and then I'll put my timing cover on. Alright, well, I soaked the timing cover and the oil pan in the simple green for a couple days, just like I did the block, and then I pulled them out, took them outside, hit them good with the garden hose, and I was going to get rid of these flathead screws that hold the timing cover on, and then I found out it was a 72-307, and the screws are right for the motor, and they make it kind of nostalgic and cool, and I decided I'm going to put them back in. So unless this starts to leak really bad, we're going to leave them. So I'm just going to, I cleaned this all up good, got it gasketed, and slapping it on. Okay, that's on. I'm going to go ahead and roll the motor back over, do the oil pump and the screen, put the oil pan on. Okay, I got a new Melling high volume oil pump. Part number is M55HV. So I've got everything here to put it on, but for right now I'm just going to set it on there, seat it, and then I'm going to, I got a new screen also. Don't have a part number on this, I'm not sure what it is, but I gotta go get a dead blow real quick. To explain to you why I'm not like bolting it down and everything. If you guys have watched me change oil pumps on the channel before, you know that I like to man, that one really took quite a bit to get it in there, and it's tight. But I don't trust it still. So these have a tendency to come loose, move up out of the oil, fall out. Motor can't pick up any oil. Bing, bang, boom. Well, motor's junk. So I always take my welder and just run a little bead, not a little bead, but just a tack weld right here where the pump and the just put a little tack weld right here where the pump and the pickup tube meet. But I wanted to put it on the motor to make sure that I got the angle of the screen right. So I got it set where I want it. It's in there, it ain't moving. But I'm going to take it over to the welder real quick, put a tack weld on it, and then I'll come back and install it. Okay, that's all it takes right there. Just one little tack. You want to be careful that you concentrate your heat on the pump and not on the tube, because if you burn a hole through that tube and it's not down in the oil, it can suck air and you won't be pumping oil. So I have to get my priming rod and the little clip that holds it on. Hang on again. We got our priming rod, we got our little clip. I always try to put this together before I put it in, because of course it's not going to hold it. Well, usually they clip in pretty good, but I guess this one's too worn out. So we'll put the clip in there anyways. We'll put this on, and we'll have to put our priming rod in after we flip it back over, and we know we're not going to flip it again. But it's harder to do that way. It's a lot easier, just put it together as a unit. There's no gasket in here. It's just metal on metal. Torque spec is about click right there. So we got that done. I got a little bit of gasket to clean up here, and I need to go get some brake parts cleaner and a rag and clean up all the assembly lube and oil I put down the cylinders and everything else off of the mating surface for the oil pan gasket. Then we'll get the oil pan on. Alright, ready to put our oil pan on. Just a little bit of brake parts cleaner I sprayed in there to rinse it off. I'm hoping these bolts are going to be long enough. Seemed like that one started. Alright, now for all these little tiny ones, we'll just get a thread or two. We'll Should be in good shape. Oh yeah. We're gonna bolt right in. Instead of making you watch me start all these bolts, I'm gonna speed it up for you. Okay, I got all the bolts started. I just noticed I never put my coolant plugs back in, so I'm gonna go ahead and knock that out real quick. And then this should be the last time that I have to flip the motor over. So I'm gonna get some brake parts cleaner and some rags. I'm gonna wipe down everything underneath here. Then I'm gonna bust out the old Make It Pretty and Make It Pretty. I'll tape off. I might just screw an oil filter on there, or I'll tape off where the oil filter goes. Probably tape off where the fuel pump goes. And then I'm basically just gonna spray the bottom of the timing cover and the oil pan. And then when I flip it over and get the heads on, I can paint the rest. But I'm gonna go ahead and tighten these down. I'm gonna put my coolant plugs back in, and then we'll shoot some paint on this thing. Alright, well, I just checked the weather outside, and we're down to 24. So, seems like a perfectly good time to paint to me. This corner over here, what I call the paint booth, it's got to be 90 degrees with these two heaters pumping in here. You walk into the rest of the shop, freeze your butt off, but this corner is about 90. Block metal, pretty warm. I mean it's not 90, but it's warm enough for paint to stick. And part of the reason I want to get this paint on the bottom is because I want to give the paint at least a half an hour, maybe an hour of flash time before I leave. It's like 8:30 at night. My wife's bugging me to get home because there's a big storm coming. But I want to get this video out by Christmas. It's supposed to be a high of 22 tomorrow with a low of 8. Not planning on coming over to the shop and trying to make it with these two little space heaters. So I'm toughing it out. I told her I'm not coming home till this motor's done and this video's finished filming. So we're hanging in there getting it done. All the motors I've done lately have been Chevy blue, Chevy orange, and then we did the red one for cherry pie. The red one looks great in cherry pie, but I'm not a fan of red. You guys are getting sick of the GM corporate blue. I know because you've told me. I've never been a fan. The old stuff, when it was supposed to have a Chevy orange engine, the orange is okay, but 78 to 82 or 84 or something like that, it's supposed to be GM corporate blue. Pre-78 Chevy orange. 84, 85, 86, somewhere in there, and newer they went to black. This is a 72, so the motor was originally orange. It's going in an 80 truck where the motor was originally corporate blue. And I decided for you guys, since I've been doing the same thing over and over again, I'm going to go with something different. And I picked cast coat iron. It's kind of a dark metallic gray color. I sprayed this on one engine before on a truck that I really wanted to keep, but things didn't work out. So since I know this truck's not going anywhere, I like the way this looks on an engine with some nice aluminum valve covers. So we're going to do it. I got the coolant drain plugs back in. I got everything wiped down with brake parts cleaner and a rag. But I forgot to tape off the stuff I needed to tape off, so give me a second to tape some stuff off. Then we're going to start shooting some paint on the old girl. I got the couple things taped off that I wanted to tape off. We're going to go ahead and start dusting this thing with some paint. And hopefully the overspray doesn't get on the heaters and start on fire. But if it does, we'll figure it out. I got the first coat of paint on the bottom, kind of 2 coats on the oil pan, and it's looking really good. I think I'm gonna spray 1 more coat on the oil pan once it tacks up a little bit. It's drying fairly quick. I think I'm gonna spray 1 more coat on the oil pan. I'll roll the motor over. We'll slap the heads on, shoot those. I'll put the harmonic balancer on at the same time and spray it. And then we just gotta throw some push rods, some lifters, and some rocker arms on. That's pretty much as far as we're going with it for tonight. After the paint dries, I'll throw the intake on real quick, but that's pretty straightforward. I mean, you put the gaskets on, set the intake on, bolt it down. That way I can put my lift attachment on the intake to lift it with the cherry picker, and I got a little roll around stand, motor stand, that I'm going to put it on because it's more stable for hauling it. But I'm going to show you guys what the paint looks like. And then, like I said, I might tap the oil pan 1 more time, and then we'll roll it over and get the heads on. So here it is. It's kind of a, like I said, it's like a metallic dark gray. Covers really well, and it's already drying. Like I said, still a little tacky, or a little wet, a little more than tacky in some spots, but it's all got good coverage and it's looking good. So I'll let it sit for a minute or 10, reshoot the oil pan, let it sit for a minute or 10. We'll flip it over and we'll keep going. All right, I got another coat of paint on the oil pan, got it rolled over, got the top wiped down, got the deck surfaced. No, I didn't, but I cleaned it up pretty good. The paint's pretty well dry. Got the deck cleaned up. Got my new gasket set on there. Got the heads all cleaned up. Sprayed them down and wiped them down with brake parts cleaner. I'm giving them a minute to dry. And I know everybody's gonna go, "Oh, Aaron, what are you doing?" But I'm reusing the old head bolts. I know they're torque to yield. I know they're one-time use, but I'm poor, and I've reused small block Chevy head bolts at least 100 times and never had a problem. The one thing I am gonna do is, everywhere a head bolt goes into a cooling jacket, I'm gonna put some liquid Teflon tape on it and then torque them down, and we shouldn't have any more leaks, which will cause head gasket failure like it did before. So I'm gonna give those heads a minute or 2 to dry from the brake parts cleaner, and then I'll set them up there, get the head bolts in, start torquing and torquing some more, and then torque them again, and then a 3rd time, and hopefully that's good enough. And we'll throw the valve train together, shoot some paint on it, and that should just about do it. As you saw, I got the head set on there. I got liquid thread sealant put on all the bolts, and I just lightly ran them down with an impact. I didn't torque on them at all. So there's, if you don't know, the torque specs for small block Chevy heads is a sequence of 3 cycles and there's a pattern, but the pattern basically starts at the center and works its way out. So I don't exactly follow the pattern. I just start in the center, work my way out and go, you know, start in the center and go in a big rectangle from the middle to the outside. Step 1 is 25 foot-pounds. Step 2 is 45 foot-pounds. Step 3, 65 foot-pounds. Now, I'm gonna do it on a time lapse because it's gonna take, I don't know, 15-20 minutes to do it all. And my microphone on my camera that I put on the tripod is dead or almost dead, and it doesn't take a battery, it has to be charged. So if I take it off and charge it, I'll be done with this by the time it gets charged up. One other thing, I'm gonna get the heads torqued down. I'm gonna put the push rods, the lifters, the push rods, and the rocker arms on. And then I've decided to go ahead and put the intake on it and then paint it and do my best. It's kind of a air gap intake, so I'm gonna do my best to paint it. But I'm gonna go ahead, even though it's an aftermarket air gap intake, I'm gonna go ahead and paint it the same color as the engine because it's black right now. It's a Victor Jr. Edelbrock, and it's not gonna match with anything else on the motor. So I guess since it's only a 307, we'll kind of make it sleeperish, I guess you would say. We'll put the intake on, paint it all, you know, engine color, and hide it, or just paint it so it all matches, you know what I mean? So I'm gonna go ahead and get to torquing. I'll do a time lapse for you guys so you can watch, and we'll get that done, then we'll throw our valve train in. Okay, I did not adjust the valves. I'm not gonna adjust the valves right now. I'm gonna leave them loose, and then when I revisit this project and go to put the motor in the truck and put the new valve covers that I haven't got yet on it and whatnot, I will set the lash then. So right now I'm just doing the same thing I always do. Take a little bit of silicone, doesn't matter what color, I prefer the gray. It's pretty much what I use for everything. And I'm just putting it around the water ports. Only place I don't ever use silicone around the intake and exhaust port, or the intake ports, ever. You don't want silicone where you're going to have fuel. I just put it around the water ports just for a little bit of extra insurance, because I've had some intakes that had a little bit of corrosion on them before, or just in general, they don't always seal the best. So just put a little bit just right around the outside of the water ports. We'll slap our gaskets on there. Set our intake on, bolt it down. One last little run over with some rags and some brake parts cleaner to make sure we got it clean, or if we touched it anywhere with dirty hands, since we cleaned it. And then we'll shoot some paint on it. Now, I've told you guys before, if you're new to the channel, you may not have heard me, but I don't use those rubber gaskets that go on the front and rear wall. I never have. And every motor that I've taken apart that had them in it, this one being a prime example, was leaking through them. So I've got a buddy that uses them every time he builds a motor. Says he's never had a set leak. I don't have proof whether he has or not, but I know I've seen a lot of leakers. So we go with the old heavy bead of silicone, and I haven't had a lot of problems. So we're going to keep doing it our way. Alright, we'll let that sit and tack up for a minute. I'll get my intake gaskets over here, get them on, and I'll throw the intake on. Alright, well, the whole time I've been putting this intake on, I thought I had the microphone on. Apparently I didn't. So basically all I said was, this intake's used, got it from Sibley's. There's never anything he doesn't have. Like, except for my performance inline 6 ports for the burnout truck, which isn't very common. People aren't, running in there looking for it, so I didn't expect him to have it, but everything else I've ever needed, he's got in stock. And it's just really nice to have a hot rod shop that you need something, you go to it, you get it. So I did get a new set of intake bolts, because just like any other motor you take apart or that's been taken apart before, when they go back together they get a mixed match of whatever bolts fit in the intake. This one was the same way. I don't really like that, so I went ahead and got a set of bolts, put them in here. What else? I don't really remember. I'm getting tired. It's late. You may be able to hear the 40-50 mile an hour winds outside. The storm's coming in fast. I'm going to tape off the plenum. I'm going to tape off the thermostat housing. I'm going to tape off the distributor hole back here. I have a set of valve covers that I've used on like 10 paint jobs, motor paint jobs, that I keep because I clean them. I cleaned them really, really well, and they're really clean on the inside, and they got 10 different colors of paint on the outside, so it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to go see if I can locate those. I think I know where they are. So we'll go get the valve covers. I'm going to tape some stuff off. I'm going to tighten up these intake bolts. I'm going to do one last wipe down of everywhere that doesn't have paint on it yet. I got to be really careful, because even though this paint looks dry, it's not cured. And if I get any kind of brake parts cleaner on the paint that I already painted, it's going to ruin it. It'll bubble, it'll fall off, it'll whatever. So I'm going to get everything prepped. We'll get some paint shot on this thing, and then I think we're going to call it a night. Alright, I almost forgot, but earlier I cleaned the balancer up real good and sprayed the back side of it so that I could put it on and spray the front when I sprayed the rest of the motor. I got the intake tightened down. I got everything, one final wipe down on it so it's ready to paint. I got everything taped off, and I spent about 15-20 minutes looking for my painting valve covers that I told you guys about, that I was so proud of, that I kept clean and everything else. And believe it or not, I have made some time to do some packing. I don't know if I packed them, but I don't think so. But I cannot find them. So I've had a few scrap guys come over here and get scrap. They might have made their way out the door. I might have scrapped them and don't remember. I don't know. But what's the next best thing other than a stock pair of valve covers you use to paint? The chrome plated tin ones that were on this motor, because I would never run these on anything, because one, I don't like the way they look, and two, I can never make them not leak. I don't care what I've done. I don't care what gasket I use. I don't care what I do. I cannot make those chrome Edelbrock valve covers not leak. So they might be the new painting valve covers, and I'm okay with that. So it's all ready to go. I'm gonna shoot some paint on it, and we'll see how it looks when we're done. Man, I was getting tired and wanting to be done and trying not to rush and still make a good video for you guys, and I was just running out of smoke fast. But now I got paint on this whole thing. It's got me all jazzed up. Like, it looks so good. I don't know what else to say. It looks so good. Before I show it to you guys, do me a favor. Go down in the comments and type Aaron. You can't put a single plane intake on a street driven vehicle. Or why a single plane? Dual plane would be much better. Or any of those things, because I've been hearing it my whole life. I think it's funny. I like single plane intakes. I've always run single plane intakes on street vehicles. Never had a problem with them. I don't care about gas mileage. I don't care about low end performance. I don't care about anything. I want to get air in the motor, get air out. Prime example, Rum Runner, street truck, Rum Runner, single plane intake. Matter of fact, the Victor Jr., exact same one I just put on that motor over there. I'm just kidding with you guys. I think it's funny because every time I put a single plane intake on something that gets driven on the street or daily driven or whatever, I hear all about how bad of an idea it is, and you can't do that, and dual plane's so much better, and this and that, and it's personal preference. I mean, I prefer single plane intakes. That's what I run. If you prefer a dual plane intake, run a dual plane intake, that's fine. I don't have anything bad to say to you about running a dual plane intake on a street car. It's fine. So, anyways, I am super stoked, if I haven't already told you, at how this thing came out. It looks good. I'm not even looking at you guys while I'm talking to you because I'm looking at this. And that intake, color matched the motor. Can't even tell it's aftermarket. Looks stock. Trust me, stock. So, alright, I'm blabbing. Probably because I'm tired. Probably because I'm excited. Okay, I've procrastinated enough. Here's the motor. I'm really happy with the color. I think it turned out great. I'm glad I decided to paint the intake instead of leaving it black. And the chrome valve covers kind of give you an idea what it's going to look like with some nice aluminum valve covers on it. So here it is. It's had about, I don't know, 15 minutes to kind of tack up. I'm hanging around, letting it tack up good, because I know as soon as I leave it wet and turn the heaters off, it'll never dry, and I'll be starting over, scraping all this paint off and repainting it. Also, you may have noticed in the time lapse when I was painting it that I didn't plug the exhaust ports. That was not on purpose. I always plug the exhaust ports when I paint. I flat out forgot. And as I was spraying across the exhaust ports, I went, crap, I didn't block off the exhaust ports. And by that point it was too late. I had already done one side. I was halfway down the other side, like there was paint in the exhaust ports. There was no turning back. So I thought about it. Honestly, is a little paint gonna hurt the motor? No. I haven't adjusted the valves, so all the valves are closed, so the paint didn't get anywhere but in the exhaust ports. First time that thing runs for 5 minutes, it's gonna burn all that paint out. It was never even there. So, not a big deal. I'm sure somebody noticed it. So did I. But anyways, I wanted to get one last video out before Christmas. I know I had a lot of comments that you guys were interested in seeing me assemble this motor. Hopefully I did a good job videoing it for you guys. I tried not to make it too long and monotonous. But that's it. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. I hope everybody has a great time. Tell everybody you love that you love them. If it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be able to do this. Y'all have a good one. We'll see you next time.